This is the best way I've been able to create and come up with to illustrate both where and how a person that is on the neurodiverse spectrum is challenged, and to compare that to somebody who is not neurodiverse. And the two that are up there, obviously I'm Tim, the tech side, and Karen is my wife. And she has a phenomenally deep business career and is pretty normal for a person you would be dealing with that would be from the business side of a company. The way that you interpret these charts is the more blue you see, the more challenge that there is in that particular area. So when you just look quick, you can say, I got a lot more challenges I'm dealing with than my wife does. But, like every human, my wife does have challenges, but they're at a relatively low level. When they're broken down in the two bottom pictures, which label communication and the social personal, you can see the only place that she really has much challenge is on the social side, and she's a little bit introverted and doesn't feel comfortable going into crowds where she doesn't know the people. And that's really her only big challenge. Other than that, she gets by in society and communicates and does all that stuff really, really well. When you go over to my side, though, you can see part of why I can be what I refer to as the undercover ASD. When you look down in the communication quadrant on the bottom left, you can see I have some areas in communication that are extremely challenging to me. But I have some areas of communication that I do very, very well at. And the letters and words I think are all too small to read, but it basically is the outgoing communication between just being luck of the draw in the genes I got and with a lot of training. I've gotten pretty good at being able to communicate outward and get what I want across. But where I really struggle, and this is why it's undercover, because you don't see this part, I struggle trying to read your face, trying to read your body language, trying to recognize that you're done with the conversation and ready to move on, and I didn't even notice. And you can see on the social personal side, I'm much more challenged in that area. I'm not really good at all the social nuances and graces, and like a lot of the people that are neurodiverse, I actually end up leaning a lot on my wife to help me navigate through those areas. And when you look at me in the top section, you can see it's kind of, again, a little unusual in that I have some areas with virtually no impact, but I have quite a number of areas that I do struggle. But that's what lets me kind of slip under the radar, and for most people, they would never guess that I was an ASD lister until some major thing comes up, like a meltdown. This explains another thing that I think is confusing to people because it works very different than it works in any other type of disease or syndrome. When we talk about the autism spectrum, we talk about low functioning and high functioning. And again, most people tend to think of that as being, you've got low functioning here and you got high functioning here. And as you move closer and closer to high functioning, that you're just impacted less with whatever that disease is. If you have a bad cold, you've got all the symptoms heavily. If you have a mild cold, you have all the symptoms lightly. Well, high functioning doesn't quite work that way. When they're saying high functioning, what we're really saying is the person is able to get by in the world relatively independently. And when we're saying low functioning, we're really just saying they need a lot of assistance and help in order to get by the world. We're not really saying what the traits are. These happen to be the traits that came from that radar map that we had just looked at, except charted out so you can see the individual ones. And even though I would be definitely considered on the very high functioning side, and like I say, to the point that I can often slip by that nobody would know if I don't tell them and we don't run into a critical type situation, I have a huge amount of challenges. And that's the part to always remember is even though you're dealing with somebody who is super high functioning, that doesn't mean that they don't have some symptoms that are huge challenges to them. They're just not the ones that cause an impediment in daily life. And another thing to really point out is I by no means am a standard or a perfect example of what an ASD lister would be like, just like none of you are the perfect example of what an average human is. There's a saying in the autism world that says, if you've met one person that has autism, you've met one person. They're all different. So don't assume because I've talked to you and you say, geez, I met this high-functioning guy and he seemed to talk really well, so what's your problem? Well, it could be they're impacted totally differently than I am, but they're still high-functioning in all other areas.